You've just accessed Hardware is Forever, your source for the expert insights, ideas, and innovations you need to do more in the electronics manufacturing industry. From optimization to operations, join us as we put the pieces together for a better approach to manufacturing. Let's go.
This is Hardware is Forever. Jay Patel is the CEO at Amtech. And Jay, I'm looking forward to today's conversation, which brings to mind for me a maxim that I like, which is slow is smooth and smooth is fast.
Yes.
With the idea that when we get our wits about us, we can operate a lot more quickly than when we're just kind of reacting or responding. So let's kind of level set as in this idea of how do we slow down to go fast? What do you mean, especially in context of Amtech and hardware development and electrocircuitry and the things that you're expert in?
Yeah. So I think, right now, just I guess in the last few decades, growth is expected to be exponential because of the nature of the revolution or the innovation that was going on, and specifically talking about software. I think when we talk about software developed for the masses, the product can scale exponentially. And since we've witnessed that exponential growth, it's almost become normalized that this is what growth looks like. This is what a successful business looks like. This is what a successful entrepreneur looks like. And I think it's been ingrained in our culture now that, if we want to be successful, it should happen really fast and it should happen really, really exponential. And I think if we look at that case, in some industries where it's more software based, I feel like that could be done if it's targeted to the right audience. But the negative thing too is, as fast, the bigger they are, the faster they grow, the quicker they fall as well. And we've had a lot of tech startups that we've seen, rise really, really quickly and then crash quickly as well. So I think, that mentality as a entrepreneur who's in the hardware space, it really it challenges you, because on one side you want to grow, you want to be a successful entrepreneur. Like for me, I felt like, okay, if I'm not doing this at this certain time and growing at this certain and generating this much revenue, then it's not necessarily I'm not being successful. I'm not a successful CEO or a leader or whatever my position is in the organization. I think, when you're talking about hardware, I found that you can't rush it. You have to go slow. And if you go slow, you can launch it and then you can start building one program on top of the other program. And that does lead to significant growth, possibly exponential, but it's over a longer time period. So it's really something that's like a push and pull, or this tension that happens that in hardware, you have to go slow. You cannot go fast and grow exponentially. And to go fast and to possibly grow exponentially over a 5 or 8 or 10 year period, you have to slow down. So I think that's where it really that was one of my aha moments when I was in hardware development and manufacturing is I got to slow down. I can't just keep for lack of better terms, the Silicon Valley mindset and apply it to manufacturing.
I'm so glad you brought up the Silicon Valley mindset, because any of us in technology or who spend time in technology, I totally agree with you. There's this sort of, and I don't know if it's even necessarily the reality, but is the projected reality from whatever media or venture capitalism or whatever that says everything's got to move at the speed of this. And do you feel like there's a pressure then to keep up? It's not necessarily the pressure to do what's best for my business, but the pressure to, everybody else is, so therefore I must be too. Like, and we talk about kind of this pressure where you must be at some sort of revenue goal. It's arbitrary, but you put it on yourself because, well, isn't that what everybody else around me is doing? That's, I don't know, dangerous to business for a lot of us, don't you think?
100%. I think it is. And, it's not a now game. And especially right now when we're seeing, it's become like a fashion. Hardware is not a now game, especially right now when we see a lot of the Silicon Valley mentality. I don't want to say Silicon Valley mentality, but like this exponential growth mentality being applied to hardware, especially in the electrification game, where we see a lot of these electric vehicle startups trying to project exponential growth and then falling flat on their face because it's a lot harder than people really seem. And I think people are finding that out. And I think, a lot of other things is even investors, when you have a great idea for a hardware, investors don't like hardware anymore because it's capital intensive. It takes time. Return on investment is prolonged. Whereas software, it's fast, it's cheap. If it fails cheap. If it grows, and it's great. So even like if you're an entrepreneur, to even get access to capital or investments or investors or venture firms, it's really difficult because everybody has shifted to this business model where if it's software, boom, like it's great. So you have to get a specific type of investor and you have to pitch it in a specific way. So I think even the leadership at hardware-based organizations feel that pressure. If it was different, we would see a lot more hardware innovation, but the economy has changed where wealth is generated through software faster and cheaper than it is through hardware. So that pressure just trickles down into the whole, I would say, industry or the ecosystem of hardware.
And it can lead to corner cutting. It can lead to innovating on the wrong things. It can lead to misreading market dynamics, it's domino after domino. Why do you think when you talk about hardware is not a now game, that it takes time? That seems on its face sort of self-evident, but what do you mean? Why does it take time? What are some of the components of that?
So to develop a hardware-based minimum viable product, it takes a lot of iteration. Instagram was at MVP when Facebook bought them, and they got a huge multiple, like a crazy multiple on it. So it's hard to do that with hardware. You have to think, okay, how is my product going to survive in the field? Because we don't know until it's in the field. When an IoT device that's supposed to be outside monitoring something, how do I design an MVP for that? And how do I get investment to be able to scale that is difficult. And typically when we're talking about hardware, there's a lot of things that happen. Is number one, we're not perfect. So we don't know really what we're doing because we're going into a new frontier. And we're always experimenting with all these new hardware applications and these new frontiers. So we don't know how it is going to act. We don't know what the failure modes are going to be. So even to go out there, you have to do a lot of research and development where, when you develop other type of, specifically software, you can test it and boom, if it works or not. The testing is a lot easier than it is for hardware. So we're not perfect. We don't understand all the failure modes. We don't understand all the scenarios. And then there's a validation stage that it has to go in. And because this hardware a lot of times is new, we don't know what the environment is really going to be like. We don't know what that new frontier is. So it's not a now game. It's, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months down the road. And then designing and prototyping takes a lot of time and effort and capital. When we do these type of iterative designs and validations for a product, it's difficult to get more and more product because it is like, I have my Rev 1. Rev 1 didn't work. Now I got to do Rev 2. And there's a cost associated with that. And investors, see that, okay, they perceive that as we just wasted 2 revs to get to over here. And that wasn't money well spent. So it's really difficult to get in that mindset that this is going to take time and give yourself that grit, give yourself that grace to be able to get to the stage where you need to start selling that product.
I think it's interesting, kind of what you're talking about, where the learning curve is more complex, because you're right. Investors might say, well, we wasted all this time and to get through Rev 1 and 2, but you learned a lot in Rev 1 and 2. You're far better prepared for the next time that you're in some sort of scenario. So that learning curve is really valuable for you, but for outsiders or for those who have some sort of different investment, literally and metaphorically, in the outcome, there can be a frustration, and then that can lead to hastiness or hasty decisions. Do you feel like how do you put that into process? So how can you, I don't know, how can you put that sort of, it's going to take time, everybody, and we're going to accept that. We're going to actually lean into that. We're going to embrace that rather than be frustrated with it. How do you systematize that or process that so that you don't get distracted with the kind of, we better move faster, everybody? Obviously, we always want to move with efficiency and alacrity, but how do you put that into process so that you feel comfortable with the pace you're going?
Yeah, I think one thing is that you have to keep the end in mind, and you also have to take a look at what everybody else is doing. We may put our pressure on our, like I've had a lot of entrepreneurs come to me and say, well, I have this idea, I want to get into market in 3 months. And it's just like, I want to, and it's just like, it's tough to explain how much time it really takes to get to that point. So I think you have to take the end and see what that future looks like, and then budget your time out accordingly, and then stick to the plan. And I think one thing that really happens is this idea of feature creep. And software feature creep may be able to be a little bit more absorbed, but when it comes to hardware feature creep, it can distract you very, very quickly and lead you down the wrong path. So I think you got to slow down. You got to know what your vision is. You have to understand, you got to give yourself time, stick to the plan. Don't allow any feature creep, and then be confident in that, and know that you're going in the right decision. And again, what helps with that is if you get a great team, if you get great consultants, or you get great people with experience that can help you get to that point. And so I think if you try to rush it, you'll learn the hard way that it's not a now game. You have to slow down to go fast. And then understand that things take time. Like if I want to eat cake, I got to bake a cake. And a cake takes, I don't even know how long, 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours to bake. You just can't rush it. This is how long it takes. A child takes 9 months to be born, and you just can't expedite that process. So I think we just have to understand it just takes a certain amount of time. Yes. Can we optimize it? 100%. Is there waste associated? Yes. Is there miscommunication? Yes. Can we work on all that? Yes. But just know and be confident that it does take time. And I think if you have that understanding and that, for the lack of better word, stoicism when it comes to hardware, you'll be more successful sooner, because it just takes, the nice thing about hardware is if you get the right project, the life of the hardware can be, 3 to 5 to 10 years. So once you have that product, now you have a good cash flow going, and now you can build on top of that and iterate and get new products out. Like, version 1 is out. Now let's do, Mark 1, then Mark 2, and then Mark 3. We can do all those different things if we get Mark 1 out as soon as possible and put all of our effort behind it. So I think it's just understanding that it's going to be slow. And I think in my journey, I grew up when the internet was coming out, and I realized, wow, I can, we can stream video, I can send email. So I never, I always leveraged these tools that made everything fast. And I never realized that these hardware things that are complex and they do take time, and I do need to slow down. So those are lessons that I learned. And since we've been slowing down and looking at our 10-year goals and 3-year goals and making decisions on a quarter by quarter basis, rather than, for me, an hour by hour basis, it's really changed the dynamics of the organizations. And I can see, why it takes a long time to develop a vehicle. I can see why it's such a massive undertaking. And even with that time, is it successful or not? We don't know. But to go fast and to grow, you have to slow down.
You feel like as a guy who's very attentive to design, I feel like for maybe the last decade, we've been in this very interesting, I don't want to call it a golden age, but something shifted, particularly 15 years ago when the iPhone first came out, where consumer electronics suddenly had a very different sensibility about the hardware and what the hardware looked and felt like. And that extended for me in the last 5 to 7 years to You mentioned EV cars, auto manufacturing. We're in this very interesting, weird stage of design. Like these cars, some of them are trying to make them look like spaceships. And it's interesting because even when they're making huge mistakes, we're moving ahead with the idea. Does this, even as you're developing specialized, hardware solutions for specialized things and not necessarily consumer electronics and things like that, but does the way that we're all interfacing with hardware every day create expectations or scenarios that aren't necessarily realistic for those that don't have deep supply chains and all these sorts of things? Because we're used to seeing a thing at Best Buy, does it mean that your customers kind of have an idea that, well, shouldn't it be like this, or shouldn't it look like that, or shouldn't it already do that, without understanding kind of how difficult that can be?
Yeah, I think Steve Jobs did a great job and brought the level of consumer electronics to a whole different expectation, but I do feel like it takes a lot of effort to get there. And I think we were at a point where intersecting point where hardware and software could match up and create something beautiful like the iPhone. And I think that type of revolution is happening, or evolution is happening, whether it's electric vehicles, whether it's autonomous vehicles, whether it's any type of automation for specifically transportation right now. I think that's happening. And that's happening, in the way that we interface with technology. Computers are not rooms anymore. They're almost furniture pieces. They're almost designer accents in your house now. I think it's a whole different level, but it's still, to get to that point, there's a lot of iteration that needs to get done. And should we expect that? Yes. Does that make the barrier of entry more difficult? Yes. So, and that's why it's going slow is that much more important, because the expectations are a lot better. Like even the MVP, before it was, duct tape, super glue, get it out there, get it working, whatever it may be. But even the MVP has to be pretty and shiny and good looking. And to get to that point, we have to slow down.
Great conversation. MVP, by the way, is minimum viable product. As our listeners might be wondering, why are we talking about most valuable players or people?
Yeah, I apologize for that.
It's good. I didn't think to mention it off the top. But really great conversation, Jay. And I always love when we get to intersect kind of your business philosophies with the realities of manufacturing and electronics manufacturing. I think that's fascinating. I think it's really a sweet spot for these conversations and for the way you think. Thanks. I'm looking forward to our next conversation.
Thanks for joining us. And a special thanks to our subscribers and followers. Consider becoming one today wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube.